I think people conflate things when we talk about the draft. Nobody's hating on Bryce Young, all right? You're really just picking the quarterback you feel can best overcome whatever limitations they have. Every quarterback that gets drafted has some knock on them going into it. And then there are quarterbacks who you never even thought about go on to be the greatest of all time, like Tom Brady. So we don't know. And the hit rate in the first round of the draft is around, in terms of, I'll go with the Mike Greenberg Hembo principle of what is a hit in the NFL draft. And that is a player that you give a second contract to. All right? On your team.
Agreed.
You give him a second contract. And the hit rate on that in the first round is about 40%, just under 40%. So we're really dealing with a less than 50-50 proposition. So all these people who have convinced themselves Bryce Young is the franchise future, man, again, you at best have a 50-50 chance at this. Flip it a coin.
You're trying to give yourself the least amount of opportunity to mess up. That's all it is. It is not 100%. There are, like, you can count the amount of 100% prospects on maybe two hands. Like, people who you know for a fact when they come out of college, they're going to be just fine.
Sure.
And even some of them, they don't work out. Andrew Luck, for example, for a lot of different reasons. So that's where I think some of the issues kind of come into play.
You're a Bengals guy, right?
I'm a Bengals guy.
Okay, so when Joe Burrow got drafted by the Bengals,
yes,
did you think he was going to be that?
I did cry. No, well, see, that's what was hard too, right? Because in Joe Burrow's situation, right, he had this amazing season, but it was one amazing season
with a loaded squad.
Especially as we have hindsight to look back on it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So you had an idea as to, okay, I hope he can get to this kind of point, and that's where I think you have to start analyzing some of these quarterbacks in this draft classes. What do they have that will translate? When I watched Joe Burrow in college, you knew that the way he processed the game is what would translate. He was very fast. He could do what he could. He could get rid of the ball, be that point guard-esque, which brings us to Bryce Young a little bit. But you saw those traits, and you knew those traits would translate. So it's okay. What do you have that they can translate? One guy I follow on Bengals Twitter, Joe Goodberry is his name. One thing he says with prospects is you should never expect a prospect to be anything other than what they were in college. And so that should be the ceiling that you're looking at. So if someone is able to be this amazing person, great. And then you're pleasantly surprised if they end up, kind of taking over and being someone you never expected, the Tom Brady's of the world, if you will.
No, even Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah, that's a prime example.
And Russell Wilson's the name that keeps coming up because Scott Fitterer spent time in Seattle, was part of that Russell Wilson run. And Scott Fitterer keeps bringing it up too. He's like, look, there were some concerns about Russell Wilson in height. Well, he overcame that. Well, also keep in mind he was drafted in the 3rd round. You didn't give up a bunch to move up to the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
To take a guy who's even more of an outlier than Russell Wilson was.
I mean, yeah.
At that time.
It's literally I'm working on a story for our WRL draft special coming up here in a little bit on Thursday, and I went through and I went to Sports Reference and just looked at the data points, and there's literally no quarterback has ever been drafted that is Bryce Young, ever, from a height and from a weight perspective. 5'10", 204. Okay, Russell Wilson was 204 at the combine,
and also Russell Wilson wasn't 6 foot as he was listed, or 5'11".
Exactly.
I was taller. I'm 5'10".
Yeah.
I'm basically Russell Wilson's height, if not a little bit taller. So, but again, Russell Wilson, when you watched him play at NC State, there was a stockiness to him. He's built out a little bit more, which is it's the frame for Bryce Young, which gets us to Mel Kiper. Mel Kiper was on ESPN earlier today. I caught a little bit of it today when he was talking to Greenberg. And he talked essentially that if Bryce Young pans out, that he's going to be some sort of new prototype for quarterbacks going forward.
The total outlier, it's 1 in a million. We've had all these years of the common draft. We've never had a quarterback this size go in the 1st round, and he's going to be the number 1 pick overall. That's what's going to be great to watch. Will he be like Russell Wilson in the 3rd round? I said he was going to be, look back and say he either made a lot of money for a lot of people or he continued that feeling that you got to be 6 foot or over to play quarterback effectively in the NFL. Bryce Young's going to open up the door for smaller quarterbacks if he has a successful career in the National Football League.
So, they said the same things about Drew Brees. We didn't get a lot of short quarterbacks. When Russell Wilson was picked up, they kept bringing up the Drew Brees comparison. And again, it was a huge stretch to make it work. Now, Russell Wilson goes on, he becomes this thing. It's not like that meant Russell Wilson, there were a bunch more Russell Wilsons coming forward. It's not, it's again, he was a third-round pick. I think you and I were talking about this before the show, in that the average height of a quarterback continues, who's drafted, and starting quarterbacks in the NFL are dropping.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are getting away from the whole super tall,
6'6",
stand in the pocket, guy. I think we all recognize that the game has changed, and the quarterbacks reflect that. But I also think it's fair. Again, it's all about how you talk about this. There's nothing objectively wrong with pointing out, like Mel Kiper did, or how we've done on this show, that there is a risk involved with taking Bryce Young in the current state that he's in. And can he put on weight? Yeah, you can put on weight, but then at what point do you cease to become what you've been?
Exactly.
When you put on weight?
There is such a difference between being 194 and being 204. 10 pounds, in big picture, may not seem like much. It's a whole different level of athleticism that you're going to be dealing with. Your body is not going to be used to that kind of change. And I think that's part of it too. Because when Bryce Young was coming out of high school, he was the #1 dual threat quarterback. So do we see him run the ball that way that we normally associate with dual threat in Alabama? No. But so much of what makes him great is his ability to use leverage, throw people off in the pocket so that he has that extra second to throw. That's so much what makes him good, is the way he uses the pocket and uses just his athleticism to find opportunities to throw. If he is 210 all of a sudden, he may not be the same guy, and then he has to change everything.
Yeah, me putting on 10 more pounds is different than an elite level athlete putting on 10 more pounds.
Exactly.
I put on 10 more pounds, I'm like, oh, the stretchy pants aren't as stretchy as they used to be, or, ooh, lumbering in my 3-mile run this morning is a little bit more of a slog than it was before. Again, that's just amateur hour stuff. We're not talking about elite level athletes and what that can do.